Hey y'all, happy Thursday. Hope you guys have had a good week so far. I wanted to go over a few things before I get started. Again, a friendly reminder that office hours where you guys can get on Zoom and ask questions are Tuesdays and Fridays from 12:30 to 1:30. Optional as always. If you need help, that's a good time. If you have questions outside of that time, always send me an email, Canvas message, whatever. I will get back to you as soon as I can figure out the answer to what your question was. The other thing is I've started by adding a recording of myself reading the assignment questions for this week. Just something I thought I'd offer you guys that you can use if you'd like. If you don't want it, you don't have to use it. It's there for you to. It's there for you if you want it. Otherwise, we will get started with our new unit for the next week or two, and it involves Japan and North and South Korea. So, like always, the first time we go somewhere new, I'm gonna do a little geography lesson to start off. So let me pull that up real quick. So we're gonna be focusing on Japan and the two Koreas. All three of these countries have a rich and unique culture and history that revolves around their locations in the world, in the Pacific region in particular. So first off, here's what we should be able to understand by the time we get done here. Should be able to understand the geographic location of North Korea, Japan, and South Korea, and how they're viewed globally. We're going to be looking at the physical features that set Japan and then the Koreas apart from other countries we've looked at before. Look at some plant and animal life that's unique to these three countries. And then we're going to look at the natural resources available to these countries and the decisions that this has forced their leaders to make over the course of their histories. So, first things first, we should start off with the current political leaders of each country. So, I'm assuming, and I know I say a lot by assuming, most of us have heard of this man here. This is Kim Jong-un. He is the current supreme leader, is what he's known as, of North Korea. He's a very secretive man. He doesn't make a lot of public appearances. And when he does, he is usually on North Korean state TV. North Korea is known for being very isolated and unwilling to engage with the outside world. The man in the bottom left here is Moon Jae-in. He is the current president of South Korea. He has been in that job since 2017, I believe. And then this man here is Shinzo Abe. He is the Prime Minister of Japan, and he has been in that job since 2012, I believe. One thing I do want to point out, though, is oftentimes North Korea will be known as the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, and that name sounds misleading, and it largely is. But formally, North Korea is known as the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. So, location in the world. One thing that I want to point out is where these countries are and who they're around. So, if you notice, Japan is actually on an island. It's a series of islands, and it's separated from the Korean Peninsula by the Strait of Korea and the Sea of Japan. Now, it has East Sea here because depending on who you ask, Japan will call it the Sea of Japan. The Koreas and China and Russia call it the East Sea. So there's a bit of a conflict over what this area is known as. But for our sake, we're going to call it the Sea of Japan. And it, along with the Korea Strait here, is what separates Japan from the Korean Peninsula and the rest of Asia. So I say the Korean Peninsula, and I'm going to give you guys a quick definition of what a peninsula is. So a peninsula, if you look, is a piece of land that is surrounded by water on three sides. So there's water here, here, and then over here. Okay, so that is what makes this a peninsula, and it has both the Koreas on it, so it's known as the Korean Peninsula. Now, South Korea shares a border with North Korea. North Korea, however, shares a border with China and Russia. So while South Korea has just a one border with North Korea, Japan doesn't have any physical borders. North Korea actually shares a border with China and Russia. And then the capital of Japan is Tokyo, with a population of right around 10 million, I believe. North Korea's capital is Pyongyang. It has a population of roughly 3 million. And then Seoul, South Korea, has a population of right around 9 million as well. Despite being separated by the Korea Strait and Sea of Japan here, the histories of Japan and the Koreas and even China are very much connected. The Korean Peninsula often has been fought over throughout history by various outside groups. Japan, China, even the Mongols invaded the Koreas at one point in history. So the Korean Peninsula is a very sought after piece of land for a variety of reasons that hopefully will make more sense in the coming weeks. Physical features and climates. So Japan and the Koreas actually share very similar climate types and similar features. Mountain ranges actually dominate Japan, with roughly 75% of the country being mountainous, the most famous mountain of which is Mount Fuji, which is actually this picture right over here. And it is actually a dormant cone volcano, and it has a very huge symbolic presence in Japanese society and culture. As I mentioned, Japan is an island nation with 4 main islands and then thousands of smaller islands. North Korea is also dominated by mountains, with roughly 70% of that country being labeled as mountainous. Now, South Korea is the odd one out in that respect. They are not nearly as mountainous as North Korea or Japan. They are relatively flat for the most part. As far as climate goes, the climate range of Japan goes from subarctic in the northern island of Hokkaido and subtropical in the islands of Okinawa. And depending on which side of the mountain range you're on in Japan will play a huge role in what type of climate you get. One side would be temperate, mild. The other side could be dry, depending on the mountain, the height of the mountain range, and whether or not rainfall is able to reach both sides. The climate of the Korean Peninsula varies depending on what part you're in, with South Korea experiencing a climate fairly similar to Japan with a subtropical climate, while North Korea is colder, with it being affected by the colder climates and mountain ranges along its border with China and Russia. It gets a lot of its winter weather from Siberia coming in to the Korean Peninsula. According to the CIA's World Factbook page, North Korea has a largely temperate climate, with rainfall concentrated in summer and then long, bitter winters. So North Korea is very seasonal. South Korea has some winters, but not nearly as harsh as North Korea. Now, these three countries sit along what is known as the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire is a region of the Pacific where a series of tectonic plates meet together and they push against each other, which creates a series of earthquakes and tsunamis. 75% of the Earth's volcanoes, which is about 450, are located along this Ring of Fire. And roughly 90% of the earthquakes in the world occur somewhere along this ring here. And this Ring of Fire is just where the different tectonic plates push and rub against each other And then every now and then one will slide up against, underneath, or on top of another, creating earthquakes, or creating an earthquake, which in this case can trigger tsunamis. And then there's also hundreds of volcanoes scattered across this ring of fire. In the area around Japan and the Koreas, there are 4 different plates that meet against one another. The Eurasian, the Pacific, North American, and Filipino tectonic plates all meet roughly in this general region around Japan and the Koreas. And thus that makes Japan one of the most seismically active places in the world, meaning Japan is one that has the more frequent amount of earthquakes in the world. They also have a very series of volcanic eruptions and just other seismic activity. And then they recently had an 8.9 magnitude earthquake in 2011 that caused damage from the earthquake itself, and it also triggered a tsunami, which led to damage in a nuclear power plant and has caused all kinds of environmental problems that Japan is still attempting to deal with almost 10 years after this earthquake. So being on an island and being along this ring of fire has created a series of natural disasters that have kind of both helped Japan and hurt Japan as well. But their location along the ring of fire is important to their society and their culture. So natural resources available, or in this case, the lack of them. Japan has been historically known as lacking natural resources needed for modern life, such as oil, natural gas, coal, gold, and copper. That is one of the main reasons attributed to Japan's reasoning for expanding in the 1930s prior to World War II with the United States. They realized they needed the materials to keep their war industry going, and they knew they didn't have it on their home islands. So they began expanding out, looking for deposits of these natural resources, in particular oil. Due to the fact that it doesn't have its own large supply, Japan has actually become the second largest importer of oil in the world, and it's also the highest importer of liquefied natural gas in the world. So a lot of the energy needs for Japan are met through outside means, so trade with other countries. And then, like I said, they have become the first and second largest importers of oil and natural gas. One thing Japan does have a large amount of, though, are forests and abundant fishing industries. Japan actually has the world's largest merchant marine fleet, meaning just ships that are dedicated just to maritime activities, ocean trading, fishing, short trade, that kind of thing. It has a large amount of forest and great fishing spots throughout the islands. The Korean Peninsula is a little better off. You can find a variety of natural resources there that Japan just doesn't have, such as the ones listed here. And that is why, as I mentioned earlier, Japan actually invaded and took control of the Korean Peninsula for roughly 40 years in early 1900s to the end of World War II, because they knew Korea had deposits of the resources they needed for their war efforts. So just a couple animals that I found that are either unique or found commonly in Japan and the Koreas. You have the Amur leopard, the dugong, which I think is similar to a manatee. I'm not entirely sure exactly what it looks like, but it is common in the waters off of Okinawa. You have the white-naped crane, and then you have the Japanese macaw monkeys. Just some animals that I found that were unique and interesting to Japan that I had never seen before. Now, here is something that I want to focus a few minutes on, and that is economic activities in these countries. So, Japan and South Korea are very similar in what they do as far as industry goes. Both countries are known for their tech industries. and also their manufacturing industries. And then Japan is also known for its fishing and maritime industry. Notable companies in Japan that fall under these industries include Nintendo. So like Nintendo Switches, Mario, those games are all produced by the Japanese company. Mitsubishi, Honda, and Toyota, the car companies, and then Sony. So if you have a PlayStation, you have bought a product made by a Japanese company. South Korea is also known for its tech industry and manufacturing. Some of their more well-known companies are Samsung, LG, and Kia. So if you have a Samsung Galaxy phone, you have a phone that is produced by a South Korean company. And then Kia, if your parents or anybody you know drives a Kia, they are driving a South Korean company car. Now, North Korea is a little tricky to understand because North Korea adopted this policy of self-reliance, meaning that by they I mean the central government, feels as though they can provide for their own people without international trade, international humanitarian aid, different things that other countries typically use on a frequent basis. So North Korea doesn't do a lot of outside trading. Their largest trading partners are China and Russia. And outside of those two, North Korea doesn't do a lot of trading due to their recent nuclear testing facilities they've developed and their missiles they've launched. A lot of countries, including the United States, have put economic sanctions on the country, meaning that they prohibit or do not allow their foreign U.S. companies to trade or do business with North Korea. So North Korea doesn't export a lot of its material or its services, and we don't send stuff there a lot either, largely for political reasons. But the largest industry in the country would probably be its military, which receives most of the country's income. I know North Korea has adopted a conscription policy, and South Korea has done this too, where they require all men from a certain age, between a certain age range, typically 18 to 35, to serve at least 2 or 3 years in their country's armed forces. South Korea has allowed women to join if they would like, and I believe North Korea has done the same, but both countries have required military service for the appropriate aged group in their country. And North Korea actually has the 4th largest military in the world with just over 1 million active service members, putting it behind the US, China, and India as far as the world's largest militaries. This one, I'm going to introduce it to you. We haven't looked at these kind of things before yet, but this is known as a population pyramid, and it shows the age of a country's people, and then what percentage of that population fits in that age group. So on the left side here, you have males and females. And so for age range of 65 to 69, a little over 4.5 million men in Japan meet that requirement of being between the ages of 65 and 70. And then it's closer to 5 million for females. And what this is showing is that Japan has a rapidly increasing age population. So a lot of Japan is growing older, and they're not having as many children below. So there are more old people in Japan than young people. And a lot of Japanese officials and the world at large are worried that eventually having this many an older population like this and not enough people to support it will lead to some social and economic problems down the road for the country. And so Japan has been attempting to encourage its population to have more children with the hope that they will be able to reverse this trend and get the population back to an even level. So that is all I have for today. The assignment is under the e-learning module for Thursday. It's a series of short answer multiple choice questions in Canvas. And then, like I said, I've added an audio recording of myself going over the questions if you want to. And as always, this assignment will be due on Monday, April 27th at 8 a.m. And then as always, if you have any questions, feel free to message me on Canvas or via email, and I will see what I can do to help you. So otherwise, there are some of the resources that I looked up for. If you want to, if something piqued your interest, you want to look into it a little bit more, here is what I used. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a good weekend, and I will see you on Monday.